Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to join us today. The CRRC is very excited for the new CRRC Validation Testing program that will launch on January 2nd, 2025. My name is Stacy Weister, and I am the Technical Manager and the Validation Testing Program Coordinator for the CRRC. Today, Beth James Bourgeois, the CRRC Program Manager, and I will be providing you with an overview of the validation testing program and the validation testing dashboard in the CRRC Online Rating Portal. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available after today. The presentation will be broken down into 3 different sections. First, I will provide a brief overview of the VT program and walk through the procedures, and then Beth will provide an overview of the VT dashboard in the CRRC Online Rating Portal with live demonstration, followed by Q&A. Before we get started, we ask that you please save your questions until after the presentation, but feel free to submit questions in the Q&A at any time during the presentation. If you're not familiar with the Q&A box, the Q&A icon should be located in the bottom of the Zoom screen to the left of the Raise Your Hand icon. Once you click on the Q&A icon, a small separate Q&A window should pop up where you can submit your questions. It would be very helpful for us if you could please note the slide number with your questions, and we'll respond to your questions at the end of the presentation. There are many things about the VT program that we will discuss today, but a general overview of the program is that products with an active CRRC rating are required to pass validation testing in order to remain active on the CRRC Rated Roof Products Directory, with the exception of reference and tile blend assembly products. Reference and tile blend assembly products are excluded from the VT program because they are subjected through their parent product. The purpose of the VT program is to verify the accuracy of actively rated product ratings and to maintain the credibility of the directory. The VT program is just one of the CRRC's quality assurance mechanisms. In addition to checking that tested values match what is published on the directory, there are 2 additional aspects that have been taken into consideration. First, products have to be validated every 7 years in order to keep the CRRC product rating active. If the product is unavailable and can't be provided, that product won't be able to complete the VT program, and the product would be removed from the directory. Product availability helps end users when selecting a product utilizing the directory to know that products with a CRRC rating are actually available. And then expanding further on accuracy. Over time, many factors can change with how products are produced and evaluated, such as the ingredients or components to a formulation, changes in material suppliers, and updates to the test methods. If any of those changes were to have a significant effect on the radiative property performance of products, that's something that we'll catch during validation testing. This table displays the phase-in schedule of when a product will be due for validation testing. On the left, we have the program year. So the first VT program year is in 2025. The products that will go through validation testing that year are those that were initially rated or last tested under random testing in 2012 or before. On the right, year initially rated is the year the product rating was first approved by the CRRC. If the product has gone through random testing in the past, which would be more recently than its initial approval date, then that's the year that was used to determine which program year it will participate in. So, for example, let's say a product was initially approved in 2010, but went through random testing in 2020. With the phase-in schedule, it would be due for validation in 2029. Or if a product was initially approved in 2018 and has not gone through random testing, then it would be due for validation in 2028. In the last row, you can see that once we reach 2032, the products that were validated in 2025 will be due again. And also, any product that was initially approved in 2025 will be due for validation for the first time. All active products are due for validation testing 7 years after initial approval of the ratings or last tested under random testing, and every 7 years thereafter. There may be circumstances where a product may be required to be validated before 7 years if challenge testing is invoked. I'm sure you're wondering, what is challenge testing? Challenge testing is not something new. It actually carried over from random testing, but it was very rarely utilized, and it didn't have a specific name. Challenge testing is an additional quality mechanism that's the same thing as validation testing that is triggered by concerns raised by a CRRC licensee, the CRRC, or another entity about product ratings that are listed on the directory. The idea of challenge testing is that the CRRC reserves the right to have a product validated before its 7-year due date if there are legitimate concerns raised about a particular product or a manufacturer. If a product is selected to go through challenge testing, the product is required to go through the next VT program year. So if a product is challenged in 2025, it's required to participate in the 2026 VT program and have passing test results in order to keep the product rating active. What products are included? As I previously mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, but just to reiterate that all product types are included in the VT program with the exception of reference products and tile blend assembly products. Reference and tile blend assembly products ratings come from a parent product, and parent products are already required to be validated, and testing the reference and tile blend assembly products would just be duplicative. It's important to note that if you are the manufacturer of a parent product, it is essential to have your product validated because companies that reference your product rely on you to keep the product active. Manufacturers can provide product specimens from a variety of sources, including a regular production line batch, retained samples held in reserve, a one-off production batch, lab batch, or by collecting from another party, such as a fabricator or private labeler. The most important point is that the manufacturer needs to provide the CRRC with proper documentation and traceability information about how the product was produced. Now that we've had a brief overview of the VT program, let's take a quick walk through the VT procedures, which can be found in Appendix 3 of the CRRC-1. The CRRC will notify licensees what products are due at the beginning of each year. It is the responsibility of the licensee to initiate validation testing at the beginning of each year, providing adequate time for the lab to submit VT test results to the CRRC prior to the end of the year, including second tests if they are required. Licensees must submit one of 3 decisions in the VT dashboard on how the product will proceed. Beth will explain the VT dashboard in detail a little later. These options include if a product will proceed with validation testing, if the product will proceed with a formula change or retesting application to replace the existing product, or if the product will be voluntarily terminated. The first option mentioned is when the licensee chooses to proceed with putting a product through the validation testing program. Here is an example of what the VT year looks like when the licensee chooses to proceed with testing. All of these actions will take place in the VT dashboard in the portal. Over the next few slides, I will go into these procedures in more detail. After the licensee submits the decision to proceed with testing, the licensee must provide the production and traceability information in the VT dashboard, but should only submit the information when the product is available and ready to be shipped to the lab. Licensees must provide information to the CRRC detailing how the samples were produced. Samples should be uniquely identifiable through the sample tag and labeling of the individual samples. It is the licensee's responsibility to package test specimens appropriately to prevent damage during shipment. In addition to the sample tag, the licensee must provide a copy of the SDS, TDS, and an instruction document outlining sample preparation when applicable with the test specimens that are being shipped to a lab. Once the licensee submits the required documentation in the VT dashboard, it's a trigger to let the CRRC know that the product is ready to be shipped, and the CRRC will select and assign a testing to a CRRC approved accredited independent testing lab. It is not a requirement for labs to participate in the VT program, and not all labs will choose to participate. However, for participating labs, will be assigned products by the CRRC based on their availability on a rotating basis. To increase efficiency and prevent delays, the CRRC will refrain from assigning new products to the same lab if the lab has not submitted VT test results for previously assigned VT products. Once the licensee indicates that the product is available to ship, the CRRC will also notify the selected lab. The lab should expect to receive the product within approximately 15 days of being notified. The lab will inspect the package upon receipt to ensure that the test samples were not damaged during shipping, samples are properly labeled, and confirm that a copy of the sample tag and, if applicable, SDS, TDS, or preparation instructions are enclosed. Should the test samples get damaged during shipping, samples are not properly labeled, or if any of the required documentation is missing, the laboratory will contact the CRRC for the next steps. The laboratory will not reach out to the licensee concerning the VT program unless instructed to do so by the CRRC. Once the CRRC assigns a lab, the CRRC will inform the licensee which lab will be conducting testing and will provide the shipping details. The licensee will then package the product test specimens carefully to avoid damage with the required printed documentation and ships the product directly to the selected lab. Once the product is received and inspected by the laboratory, they will conduct testing according to the current CRRC approved test methods, not the test method used for initial testing. Although test methods are not updated frequently, just to be clear, if a test method is approved by the CRRC and replaces an existing test method, when a product is validated, the current test method will be used. In addition to the solar reflectance and thermal emittance, products like liquid applied coatings and single-ply membranes will also have their thickness measured, and color family products will have colorimetry measurements taken. The lab will not report the VT results to the licensee. The lab will report the VT test results directly to the VT dashboard in the portal, usually within 4 weeks of receiving the specimens. The lab shall not disclose validation testing results with anyone outside of the CRRC unless the CRRC has requested otherwise. The licensee will be able to see the results in the VT dashboard once the results have been reviewed by CRRC staff. The lab will then retain the specimens for at least 30 calendar days following completion of testing. Although the licensee is responsible for sending the VT test specimens to the lab will directly invoice the CRRC, not the licensee. Once the lab submits the results in the VT dashboard, the CRRC will review the results prior to paying the lab invoice. The CRRC will evaluate the test results. An important point is that the product must pass the tolerance for both solar reflectance and thermal emittance. This requirement is not something new, and also the tolerance for passing and failing has also remained unchanged between the programs. In order to pass the validation test, the product must be within plus or minus 0.05 of the original solar reflectance. And the thermal emittance must be within plus or minus 0.05 of the original thermal emittance if it was less than or equal to 0.3, or within plus or minus 0.1 if the original thermal emittance was above 0.3. Again, a product has to pass both solar reflectance and thermal emittance to meet the requirements of the validation testing program. If a product fails to meet the VT program requirements in the first test, the CRRC will assign a second lab to perform a second test following the same procedures that were just discussed. Products will have 2 opportunities to meet the requirements of the VT program, and if the product fails to meet the requirement of 2 tests, the product is terminated from the directory on December 31st of the year that the product was due for validation testing. For example, if a product is due for validation testing in 2026 and it has gone through 2 different tests, and if it still does not meet the requirements of the VT program by December 31st, 2026, it will be terminated from the directory. Products that have passed both solar reflectance and thermal emittance during the first test or second test, if needed, the product has met the requirements of the VT program and the program is completed for that product. The product will remain active on the directory for another 7 years and will need to be validated every 7 years thereafter to remain active on the directory. The second option a licensee can choose is to reformulate or re-rate a product that is due for the VT program without going through the VT process. Here's an example of what the VT year looks like when licensee chooses to reformulate or re-rate a product. Again, all of these actions will take place in the VT dashboard in the CRRC Online Rating Portal. If the licensee chooses to re-rate the product without going through the VT program, the reformulated or retested product rating procedure shall be followed in accordance with Section 3.9 and Appendix 6 of the CRRC 1. The existing rating may be retained until the new rating is published or until December 31st of the VT year, whichever is sooner. It's important that the licensee ensures they provide decisions and take actions, leaving enough time to complete the process before the end of the year. Failure to have passing VT results or new initial ratings by the end of the year that product was due for validation testing will result in a product's permanent removal from the directory at the end of the year on December 31st. Finally, the third option the licensee can choose is to voluntarily terminate a product. Here's an example of what the VT year looks like when the licensee chooses to voluntarily terminate a product. Again, all of these actions will take place in the VT dashboard in the CRRC Online Rating Portal. Licensees have the option to participate in the VT program. If a licensee chooses not to participate in the VT program for any reason other than reformulating or re-rating, the product will be voluntarily terminated. If the product is voluntarily terminated, the product's rating will be terminated from the directory on December 31st of the year that the product was due for validation testing. Now that we've heard about the VT program, Beth is going to walk you through the VT dashboard in the CRRC Online Rating Portal.
Great, thank you, Stacy. Just a moment while I share my screen. All right. Great, now that Stacy has provided an overview of the new validation testing program requirements, we will take a look at the changes to the CRRC Online Rating Portal, where all decisions and actions related to validation testing will be made. So what's new? You may have noticed when logging into the portal that there is a new validation testing dashboard. This is where you can see the year that your product is due for validation testing, where you will submit your decision on how you want to proceed, enter production source information, monitor the validation testing status, and print the sample tag, which you will include in the box containing your specimens that will be shipped to the CRRC assigned test lab. Additionally, a validation testing section has been added to the application overview, which is accessible by clicking on the application ID of your product. There you can view the assigned test lab and view the validation test results when submitted. The main steps you will complete for each product when it is due for validation testing is to submit your decision. If proceeding with testing, submit production source information, wait for test lab assignment, print your sample tag, and then send your specimen to the assigned test lab. Now I will go into further detail for each of these steps. The first step is to submit your validation testing decision through the validation testing dashboard. You cannot submit your decision prior to the year your product is due for testing. The year your product is due, you will receive an email notification on January 2nd of that year, and the Submit Decision button will turn green and allow you to click on it. You will have three options. You can proceed with testing, retest, or voluntarily terminate your product rating. If you decide to proceed with testing, a passing validation test is required to keep your rating active on the directory. You will have two chances to pass, but if you fail two validation tests conducted by two different test labs, then your product will be terminated on December 31st of that year. Until that time, it will remain active on the directory. If you decide to retest your product rating, a draft formula change or retesting application is automatically created in the main product dashboard. You must proceed with testing and weathering of your new specimens. Once the initial test results are approved, they will replace the previous formulation. If initial test results are not approved prior to the end of the year, the product rating will automatically terminate on December 31st. If you decide to voluntarily terminate your product rating, your product will be terminated on December 31st and remain active until terminated. At the time of termination, regardless of the reason, whether voluntarily terminated or due to a failed validation test or retesting, you must cease use of the CRRC rated product logo and CRRC product label from any product packaging and marketing materials, digital or print, at that time. If you decide to proceed with validation testing, when you are ready to send your specimens to the test lab for testing, you must first click on the green VT Production Source button in the validation testing dashboard. This is where you will select the validation testing contact and submit specific batch information for the specimens you are submitting for testing. While your decision should be submitted as soon as you have decided how you want to proceed, you may not have your specimens ready for testing at that time. It may be days, weeks, or months after you submit your decision that you have your specimen ready to submit for testing. You would wait to enter the VT production source information until you are ready to proceed, since the specimens need to be sent to the test lab within 15 days of test lab assignment. The validation testing contact selected will receive all portal email communications moving forward regarding this validation test. If a second test is required, this information will be submitted again for the second test. You can select the same or different VT contact if it is different for the second test. The batch number must be different, though, from the batch submitted for the first test. And again, you must send your specimens to the test lab within 15 days of assignment, so do not submit the production source information until you are ready to proceed with testing. When you submit the production source information, the VT status will be pending test lab assignment. When CRRC staff assigns a test lab, you will receive an email notification and the VT status will move to pending test results. The assigned test lab will also be visible in the application overview by clicking the application ID on the left. When you receive notification that the test lab has been assigned, it is time to send your specimens to the test lab. Navigate to the validation testing dashboard to print your sample tag. The sample tag includes your product's information, the assigned test lab information, and the specimen preparation instructions based on the product type of your specimen. If you have a coating, liquid applied roof covering, or other product that has specific application instructions, please include the safety data sheet and the technical data sheet in addition to the sample tag in the box with your specimens. Then you're ready to ship. Test labs do not have a separate validation testing dashboard like licensees do. However, a validation testing column has been added to the main dashboard. Labs should click on the Unsubmitted Test Results filter to view applications that require validation testing to be submitted. The filter only shows unsubmitted test results. Validation test results are now submitted the same as initial, rapid, or age testing, and the results appear in the validation testing section of the application overview. When validation test results are approved, the product rating's VT status is moved to past validation testing, and a new year is created for 7 years in the future. If the first validation test fails, then we will proceed with a second test. The validation testing status moves to pending production source second test, and you must navigate to the validation testing dashboard to submit the VT production source for the second test. The button will be green again to indicate that the information needs to be submitted. The process for the second test is the same as the first test, and once the production source information is entered for the second test, CRRC staff will assign a different test lab to conduct the second test, and you will be notified by email. When the test lab is assigned, you must print the sample tag again, which will be updated with the new information, and send that with your specimen to the lab. If the second test fails, then your product is considered to have failed validation testing and will be terminated automatically on December 31st. If it passes the second test, then you have passed validation testing and will not be due for testing for another 7 years. Licensees have access to validation test results in the validation testing section of the application overview of their application. This is accessed by clicking the application ID in the validation testing dashboard. The VT section shows the VT status, the production source information submitted through the VT dashboard, the assigned test lab, and the validation test results when available. If a second test is required, it will appear as round 2 beneath the round 1 test information. And now we're going to switch to a live demo of the portal. So this is logged in as a CRRC licensee in the CRRC Online Rating Portal. So you'll notice when you log into the portal, you're automatically taken to the main dashboard, which is where all of your product ratings live. You should be very familiar with this. This is where you submit new applications, where you manage your existing applications. Right next to the dashboard is validation testing. And as you can kind of see, we've modeled the validation testing dashboard after the main dashboard so that the process is familiar. The information should be very similar. There's just new validation testing decisions that can be made here. So with validation testing, you'll notice you can search for applications, there's a filter. One of the main features is that you can see the validation testing year. These are all set for 2024, but you can filter applications. And if you have numerous applications, you can filter by year, so you can plan ahead. You can fiscally plan for the year that a bunch of products are going to go through validation testing per se, or you can just, take a look at what's coming down the pipeline. So when you go to validation testing, you'll see that the year that your product is due for validation testing, so this is 2024, that the submit decision button will be green. And this indicates that you need to submit how you want to proceed with that product rating. And as Stacy mentioned earlier, it's best to do this at the beginning of the year because you need to provide adequate time to potentially complete 2 separate tests if the first one fails. So you don't want to wait to even the middle or end of the year to submit your decision, because there won't be time to get your tests, the test results in for submission. So you want to make sure you submit your decision right away, especially if you want to proceed with testing. So what that looks like is you just click submit decision. You'll see that the 3 options: proceed with testing, retest, or voluntarily terminate. So if you click on each one, it'll give kind of a brief description of what that means. So if you terminate, the product will automatically terminate on December 31st and will not retain its rating. If you want to proceed, you click submit. With retest, it'll let you know that this product will be replaced by a new formula change or retesting application. When you hit submit, that's when the draft application will be created and it will appear in your main product dashboard. And you just proceed with that formula change or retesting application like normal. And then if you want to proceed with testing, then the product will be made available for validation testing this year in order to remain active on the directory. If you want to proceed, you would click submit. And then it just brings up a list of next steps. So when it's ready, you enter the production source information, and it just kind of goes through the next steps that we just went over. And if you want to proceed with testing, then you would click submit decision. And you'll notice as soon as that happened, then the green VT production source is now available. And again, don't enter this information until you have your specimens in hand and you're ready to actually proceed with sending them to a test lab. And you'll notice that when I hit decision, when I entered the decision, this changed from pending decision to pending production source first test. And every time that there's a significant validation testing status change, you will receive an email, an automated email from the portal in conjunction with the validation testing status. But anytime you're curious about where your product is in the process, you can come to the dashboard and you can check out the status here. So this indicates that it's pending production source, requires you to come in and fill out this information. So you would click on the VT production source, and this is just confirming that by submitting this information, you're ready to send the specimens to the test lab. And you click confirm and continue. And this is where you would select your validation testing contact. The contacts that appear here are the contacts that you have, the rating program contacts that are in your contact list in the portal. So you would select who you want as your validation testing contact. Up until this point, anyone who is who is a rating program contact in the portal receives the email notifications. Once a VT contact is selected, only that VT contact will receive the communications regarding this product test. So you select your validation testing contact, the production source type, enter in the batch number, the date produced, and any notes relevant to that production batch. And then you click submit. And you'll notice that the validation testing status changed to pending test lab assignment. So what this tells you is that now that you've submitted that information, it's on the CRRC to go in and enter a test lab, to assign a test lab. And when the CRRC does that, when we go in and assign a test lab, the status will change from pending test lab assignment to pending results first test. And You'll also notice that when this status changes, that your VT sample tag is also available to print. So when it moves to pending results, the test lab's been assigned, you would go in, you'd click print, it generates your sample tag, you can click print in the top right corner, and you'll notice it just has all of your product rating information there, the production source information that you entered through the VT production source, and the test lab information where you're going to send your specimens. And then finally, the instructions. These are based on the product type in your application. So if it's metal, a coating, single ply, what have you, these instructions will be specific to that product type. So you would print that out. And then if you want to also take a look, I mentioned the application overview. So I'm just going to show you what that is here. So this is also available on the main dashboard. All of your product ratings have an application ID that you can click on to view your application. We're just going to take a look at this one here. And so you'll notice that at the bottom of the screen, on this bar at the bottom, it has the different sections. So you can just skip to the validation testing section by clicking validation testing. But what you're, in case any of you haven't explored this before, if you haven't looked at your application information, what is on here is just the application information submitted. When you created your application, it also has your test results submitted from the test lab. So at any time, you can take a look at the test results. It has your lab contact information. And then beneath that is the new validation testing section. So you'll see that it has the validation test status. It has the production source information that you entered again through the dashboard. It has the test lab that's been assigned. And then here it says pending approval because it's waiting. The test results have not been submitted yet. And when they are submitted, they will appear, you'll be able to click on them just like with the initial test results here. You'll be able to click and view the test results submitted. And then the results will also appear down here. And they'll be compared to the initial rated values, and you'll be able to clearly see whether they pass or fail validation testing. Once the test results are entered, CRRC staff will go in and review the test results and either approve them if they've passed or fail them if they have failed validation testing. And then I'm just going to go back to the main VT dashboard. So if they fail validation testing, or if they fail the first test, then the status will change to pending production source second test. And again, this is what it looks like when it goes from gray to green to indicate that you need to submit the production source for the second test information. And you would just repeat the same steps that you did. You submit the production source information, staff assigns a test lab, you would go in and print your sample tag, and then you would send your specimens to the test lab. So everything, all of those decisions are completed here. You print your sample tag. You would print your sample tag again because the information is updated. So that is pretty much it for the licensee side. I'm just going to switch real quick and take a look at the laboratory side. So give me just a second to switch my screen here. Okay, so I'm logged in as a test laboratory. So as you can see, there's no separate validation testing dashboard. Everything is still within the main dashboard, but what you will notice is that there is an additional column for validation testing. So test labs will submit test results the same way that they do initial, rapid, or age testing. If you have not been assigned to submit validation testing for a particular product, it will just say NA. If you have already submitted test results, you'll be able to go in and view them if you'd like. And if you are to submit test results, then this edit icon will be visible. But the cool thing is that when you go to filter applications, we've added a filter for unsubmitted test results to make it very easy to just select validation testing, and only the products that require validation testing to be submitted will appear. So you'll see that there are 2 products that require validation testing. Once you have the testing completed, you would click in here and you would submit the information the same way as you would any of the other test result forms. Okay, so before I switch back to the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and just ask if there are any questions about the portal while I'm in this view. I'm happy to walk through. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the licensee view. And yeah, at this time, if there are any questions specific to this portal process, I'm happy to go through anything again if you want to see what something looks like. So I'll just give it just a second to see if any questions come in. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and switch back. Give me just a moment. Okay. So now that we've gone through the live portal demonstration, we've gone over the additions to the portal. I'm just going to go into next steps. So throughout the validation testing process, program participants receive automated email notifications through the portal. So until a validation testing contact is selected, like I mentioned, the initial notifications are sent to rating program contacts. So please review your contacts in the portal company section to ensure that you are a rating program contact if you want to receive those initial emails. Emails are sent at the beginning of each year for validation testing launch and throughout the VT process when the validation testing status changes. Be sure to check your spam folders for any missed emails if you have a product that's due for testing and you're not receiving any communications from the CRRC. You may need to check your email filters to allow emails from no-reply@portal.coolroofs.org. And then the next milestone is that for licensees who have products that are due for validation testing next year, so 2025, the rating program contacts will receive a notification this December, on December 2nd, and the validation testing year will officially launch on January 2nd of 2025, and you'll receive another notification. And after this webinar, the recording will be posted to the CRRC's validation testing webpage, which is the link on the screen. I'm also going to send an email to all program participants with a recording of this when it's available as well, so that you have it for reference. And then finally, here are some resources for you to navigate the new validation testing program. So we've updated the procedures. They're outlined in the CRRC One Roof Product Rating Program Manual, which has been updated on the website. It can be found on the validation testing page or on the All Forms page of the CRRC website. And then we have also updated the portal FAQs. So when you're logged into the portal, up at the top right, you'll see FAQ. There's an entire validation testing section that has been added to those FAQs. So those are also a really good reference. And then additional information is located on the CRRC validation testing webpage. And my contact, along with Stacy's contact information, is located on the staff contact webpage. And we highly encourage you to reach out to either one of us with questions for program questions for validation testing or specific questions related to the portal. We're both happy to answer any questions you may have as you navigate through that process. So thank you so much for attending this webinar.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it.